This year they called it the Arab Spring, the pro-democracy uprisings that swept across North Africa and the Middle East. But now a shocking blow in the tiny Gulf state of Bahrain, a key ally to the West. Doctors there are being jailed. Their offence? They treated protesters who were injured during street demonstrations. Hamish MacDonald has that story.
It was the revolution that never quite happened. Bahrain's mostly Shia uprising against the Sunni-led monarchy. At least 30 people died and hundreds more were wounded in the crackdown.
I see his head bleeding.
Definitely a live ammunition because the femur, the bone is completely shattered in pieces.
And now 20 doctors and nurses who treated the injured have been jailed for up to 15 years. In a hearing that lasted just 7 minutes, they were found guilty of trying to overthrow the monarchy. Mona El-Tahawi is an Arab-American scholar and speaker.
The Bahraini regime knows it can get away with anything because it's watched and heard absolutely nothing from mostly its Western allies. I mean, first of all, its huge neighbour, Saudi Arabia, sent in tanks to quash the uprising there. And absolutely nothing happened on the international stage. And even worse, the United States, a major ally of this tiny royal family that rules as a minority vis-a-vis the majority Shia population. The United States has its Navy Fifth Fleet there, and it considers Bahrain a very important and necessary buffer against Iran.
Is it out and out hypocrisy, do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, the sentencing of the doctors and the nurses is outrageous. And had it happened in Egypt, had it happened in Syria, had it happened in Libya, anywhere but Bahrain, we would have heard a huge outcry, especially from Washington.
So why, in your view, is the West so vocal on some of these uprisings and revolutions and less so on others?
I think the West, by and large, has been very confused and caught unawares by the uprisings and revolutions in the Middle East and North Africa. I think the main reason for that is because for a very long time, many countries in the West chose this myth of stability. It thought that these dictators that it propped up could guarantee stability, and it chose to ignore the freedom and dignity that the citizens of those countries paid as a price.
So what should the West do then? It can't go and invade every one of these countries to topple the regimes.
I don't hear anybody on the ground saying to the West, come in and rescue us for the sake of democracy. Instead, what they're doing is they're saying, clearly recognize that we are fighting for freedom and dignity and understand that your hypocritical foreign policies are standing in the way of our freedom and dignity. And instead, what they're calling for from, say, Washington or the various European capitals that form the European Union or other countries in the West is they're calling for a very clear message. They're asking on the West to support their calls and not to be hypocrites that pretend to support the calls and then, in the case of Egypt, continue to provide 40% of the military's budget while the military stands in the way of freedom.
The events of this year have, to a large degree, changed the way that Arabs see the world. How do you think these events have changed the way Australians should see the world?
People in the region have woken up and have said this stereotype of us as being passive, as being lazy, as being violent, as being a people who love strong-armed dictators like Saddam Hussein or Hosni Mubarak. These stereotypes are all unfair, and these various uprisings and revolutions have directly challenged those stereotypes. So I urge Australians to consider that the people in the Middle East and North Africa are none of those stereotypes, but are instead people who want freedom and dignity. I just urge Australians to just lay aside whatever stereotypes they had of Arabs and other groups in the Middle East or North Africa, and just to consider them simply as human beings.
Mona El-Tahawi there with Hamish MacDonald.